All right, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be ranking chest exercises, the most common ones that you see done in the gym. I might have some rankings that you don't agree with. You might have some rankings that I don't agree with, but we all can have an opinion on things, right? So drop yours down in the comments below. If you don't like mine, let me know. If you love it, let me know. But let's get started with some of the most utilized chest exercises, some of the ones that make the rounds the most. So let's start with this exercise right here, the Incline iso hammer machine. All right, so pros to this machine, right? It converges. It has a pretty good hand placement for you. Cons, it gets heavier as it gets to the top, and as it gets to the top, you start to get a little bit more delts, a little bit more triceps, and so if you're going all the way out, it might not be quite as good for the chest, but you can still get nice and deep into it. So I'm gonna give this one an overall, I know this is gonna surprise some people, I'm gonna give it a B tier. Not quite A, not quite S. We're gonna go with B. On to the next one. How about just the regular flat press for this? So it has some similar issues to the one before, but the line of path is a little bit better, I find, overall. And you can always stop the motion just a little bit short. It's almost easier to stop the motion short with this one than it is with the other and not lose out too much. So this one I am actually going to give, and people might be surprised by this, I'm gonna put this one in the A tier. And the last one, the last hammer machine that we have here is this one. Now, this one is going to shock a lot of you. And the reason for that is because a lot of you are going to hate it. But I'm going to tell you how it can be pretty good. See, if you set up like this and you get into it, when the weight gets heavy, you start to slide up the seat and it starts to push you back, so it's not very stable. But if you have, like I have a seat belt that I can actually tie around here and it holds me down while doing this exercise. And as long as you're able to be held down during this exercise, the path is pretty nice. But because of those limitations, I can't put it any higher than B tier. Now, on to the one, the only, the bench press. Now, this one is a little bit tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you guys some of the limitations, some of the strengths, and my overall ranking might not be what you expect it to be. So, first things first, if you are performing the bench press in a way that is not great for the chest, i.e. you're getting a huge amount of arch, so you have very little range of motion, and all you're doing is just doing a little bit of a lockout, obviously it's gonna shoot way down to like D tier. But assuming you actually perform it in a manner that is solid for the chest, you have good grip width, you're taking, I haven't done this in so long, it's gonna be a little bit interesting. But assuming you take and you have a good path, get it now nice and slow, back up. You see that little side to side if you don't stabilize yourself perfectly, it's not gonna be great. But assuming you do this consistently, you've worked up the neurological adaptations that you need in order to do it well, this can be either a D tier exercise or it can shoot its way all the way up into A. So because of that variability between it and because of the fact that it can be different for different people, I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Now, to the Incline barbell press. This one is one that I'm gonna say is pretty well similar to the other one. However, because it does give a slightly better upper chest stimulus, which a lot of people are lacking on when it comes to their training, well, not anymore. Now everybody's focused on the upper chest, but it used to be something that people lacked out on a lot. But overall, the path's pretty good. The only issue that I have is, I shouldn't say the only issue, I have two issues. I have one, stability issues that you're always going to deal with when it comes to free weights. But then the second one is this angle is very high. So a lot of this is going to be shoulders. Like if I was to perform this would almost be a shoulder press for me. So in order for me to make it a bit more chest, I would make sure that I arched a lot in order to make that more upper chest. And again, because I use machines all the time, you guys are going to be surprised to hear me say this, but I could go honestly all the way up to the A tier for this. But because of the limitations, similar to the bench press, we're going to put it in the B tier. Unfortunate, one of the machines that we wanted to use is being used for when I go to the other gym, and then we'll continue this list. Now, because of the fact that we don't have every machine in the world available to us, I'm going to have to bring different machines together. So I'm not necessarily referring to this particular machine when I refer to what I'm about to refer to, but I'm referring to laying down variations of machines that are plate loaded, that have a little bit of convergence and allow you to push through like this. Now, these machines are great. What I really like about them is they take a really solid path and they give you a lot of stability. You don't have to worry about the bar moving out of place or dumbbells or whatever it is that you're working with. And because of that, I'm going to put these in the A tier. The only reason it doesn't get all the way up into the S tier for me is because a lot of them, the handle placement can just be weird for your particular grip. So if you notice, this one has this, it has this, but it's kind of like, at least for me when I perform it, it's a little bit awkward overall, and because you can't adjust it too much, it can make it a little bit harder to get a perfect pressing motion, but still a very, very solid exercise, so I'm going to put it in the A tier. On to the next one. We have a plate loaded, and again, because we don't have every machine available to us, we're going to assume that we're referring to, in general, plate loaded, seated, converging presses. Now this one right here goes up a little bit, so I don't like it quite as much as I do some others, but let's assume that it didn't move upwards too much, right? Let's assume that this one was actually going into more of a straight path, kind of like a Nautilus push machine. I'll throw one up here so you guys can see it. But because of the fact that it's very easy for you to switch the load, you can get good range of motion, it's a good path, the pecs are involved the entire time, and it's a very smooth path and no stability requirements really. This is my first S tier exercise. And similarly, we have the variations of this that are incline. Now, this one is a little bit interesting because you can push, but the thing that I don't like about these machines is they're very, very difficult if they don't fit your structure perfectly to adjust. So for some people, this is gonna be a straight up S tier exercise, gonna fit their structure perfectly and they're gonna be able to push it and it's gonna feel great. And then for other people like me, when I use these particular machines, a lot of times I find that I just can't get my body positioned perfectly for it. So for me, this might be a B tier exercise, but for other people, it might be S tier. And because of that, I'm gonna put it right in the middle. I'm gonna go with A tier. Remember, if an exercise does not fit you or does not suit your goals, just because I might have said it was an exercise does not mean that you have to do it. You could find a B tier exercise and be like, holy crap, like I get an amazing contraction with this. I can move it perfectly. My stability requirements are next to nothing. And I could have it in the B or C tier and you could be like, this is top notch. So don't just go off of this list and say I have to base my entire program around this. Now, we're gonna throw an interesting one in here because a lot of people don't even realize that this is a chest exercise or can be a chest exercise. This is pullover. So, assuming you have a decent pullover machine, you can get yourself, come on, guys, I'm too fat. I have to adjust this. Assuming you can get yourself locked in from here all the way back to about here, this portion of the movement right here is primarily chest and triceps, right? Once you go from here to here, then you're involving the lats more, and then it transfers over into the chest as you get here. So assuming you stay in this range right here, you're going to get a pretty decent chest stimulus out of it. However, due to the fact that a lot of people will find it hard on their shoulders, due to the fact that it's going to be harder for a lot of people to load, to figure out exactly how they want to do it, I can't rank it any higher than the tier. So I think it's our first C tier exercise. But I'm going to say this, if you like it and it works really well for you and you can find it loadable, like I've been playing around with it, getting better and better at it. And for me, it's shooting a little bit higher up on that list, but I would say for just straight up first thing in your program, like you've never done these things before, you might have some difficulty with this. So I'm going to put it C tier. All right. We cannot talk about the chest without talking about dumbbell presses. I mean, it's been the bread and butter of bodybuilders for 50 years. So let's talk it through. Dumbbell pressing. What are the pros? What are the cons? And immediately right off the bat, you already know one of the cons, I'm going to say, is stability. Not only do you have the stability demands of having it be free weight and not on a fixed path, you also have the stability demands of it not being even from side to side. You have to be able to stabilize on both sides, which some people view as a positive because they view it as better for their shoulder health, their different state, like they like the stability aspect because they view it as more functional. However, if we're talking just purely growth, we're not talking about keeping the shoulders healthy, anything like that. All we're worried about is what we can output into an exercise. So if you're somebody who does dumbbell press very often, your stability demands are going to be a little bit less than somebody who just does it here and there. So for me, I just do it here and there. So if I was to take and start dumbbell press, it would be D tier. Why? Because I have not made the neurological adaptations, or I would have to readapt to it because I haven't done it in a very long time. So for me to just throw in a dumbbell press out of nowhere for one particular workout we're looking at a D tier exercise. Now, if I was to do it more consistently, if I was to do it to the point where the stability demands were a lot less, I was a lot more comfortable with the movement pattern, I make those connections, then that's going to shoot way up. So I'm going to say for this one, it can be in two different categories. If you don't do it often, we're going to put it in the D tier. But if you do it often and you've made those connections, we're going to put it up to the B tier. Don't you love this? I can be a lot more nuanced here than on TikTok. I don't have to say exercise bad, exercise good. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Now, for the incline, this one, you might be surprised that I'm actually going to rank a little bit differently. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and say that this, for me, I'm going to move it one up. I'm going to move it from D to C if you don't do it very often, and from C to A if you do it a lot. I honestly could not explain to you what it is, but I feel that I can do a better incline dumbbell press when I'm not doing it very often than just a regular flat press. I don't know if it has something to do with the stability demands, being able to drive myself back into the seat like this, but I feel it is a little bit more stable and that it is a little bit easier to load even if you haven't been doing it as often. So for that reason, I'm going to put it into the A tier. You completely disagree. I really don't care on this one because I don't do it very often. But I would move those rankings from that D to B, from C to A. And we already kind of talked about this one, so not really talked about it, but kind of talked about it, which is the dumbbell pullover. We talked about it in terms of the machine over there, but you can also do this in a free weight variation, where what you do is you get yourself pinned down. If you don't get yourself like some dumbbells to put over top of your feet or a seat belt to hold yourself down, it's going to be extremely unstable, bad exercise. But assuming you have those stability things in place and you have the dumbbell here and you're bringing it all the way back and coming up, all the way back and coming up, overall, I'm going to go ahead and put that as a B tier exercise. I find that people can connect with that a little bit quicker than they can with the machine. I don't know the exact reason for that, even though it's less stable. I find that people are better able to get into this one and figure it out more quickly than they are the other. So I'll put it in the B tier. All right, and our next exercise, we're talking about the free weights, right? And you can't talk about free weights and chest without talking about the dumbbell fly, one of Arnold's absolute favorites. And he had a big chest, so it must be beautiful, right? Not really. So the dumbbell fly is nice because you can get a little bit extra stretch, but there's just so little range of this that's actually under contraction. Like here, my chest is hardly working at all. It really only works in this position here. So I'm not saying that it's bad that you're only getting a stretch work out of it, but that is it. And there's so little stability while doing it and possibility for the shoulders or something else to just like be moving a little bit, give yourself limiting factors that, I'm sorry, I hate to do it, Arnold, but I'm gonna put this in the C tier. Same thing goes for if you're doing this in an incline. The lack of stability while doing it, the lack of range of motion where there's actually tension, I can't put it any higher than C, and I am very, very sorry for that. But there is another fly variation that we can talk about, and that fly variation is the machine. Somebody is on it right now, but in about a minute or so, I'm gonna ask him if I can get in a set and show you guys what I'm talking about. All right, and we've talked about flies, but we only talked about free weight flies. What if you could take that exact same motion and make it very stable? Make it go exactly where you want it to go. Be able to determine where the tension is at. Especially with a machine like this machine is even crazier than most because I can determine where the resistance is hardest. I want the resistance to be more in the bottom, I can put it there. If I want it to be more at the top, I can put it here. And that is just a thing of beauty in and of itself because you can now dictate what you want this exercise to be. So I'm going to go ahead and say this, because you can get nice isolated work, you can decide where the tension is at, you can take a perfect path. Oh man, like this is just straight up chest the entire time. I don't have to worry about any movement, everything's very, very stable. There's nowhere you can put this except for S tier. So this is only our second S tier exercise. So that's pretty crazy, but yeah, I'm gonna put this in the S tier. And I just remembered there is one more thing that we haven't talked about, so let's go over to it. And the last exercise that we are going to talk about is the Smith machine press, flat variations and incline variations. Now this one is really, really simple because it's very stable. You don't really have to do a whole lot to get used to the movement. As long as you set the bar right, you're good to go. So this one is probably the least offensive machine or thing that you could possibly use because it's similar to a barbell. You have plate loaded. Even people who are hardcore will like it. So I'm going to go ahead and put the Smith machine in the A tier. Why don't I put it in the S tier? One very simple reason: no conversions. And because of the fact that you can't get conversions, it doesn't follow the path for the pecs perfectly. Doesn't mean it's not great. Like, it's going to get a lot of lengthen in mid work, but it's going to get very little in terms of the short up here. And that is the only reason I'm leaving it out of the S tier. If you had a Smith that somehow perfectly came in like this, insert the Panatta machine right here, then I would put it in the S tier. But for now, we can only put it in the A tier. And there it is, guys, my chest tier ranking. Put yours in the comments below. You can use these exercises. You can throw in some more if you think of them. And I'm really curious to see your list. But this is my particular list. You can make of that what you will. TNF out.